There is a certain kind of person who walks into a room and says nothing. They don't announce themselves. They don't demand attention. They don't fill every silence with noise. And yet, somehow, everyone feels them. The air shifts. Eyes drift in their direction. People begin to wonder, what are they thinking? What do they want? Why aren't they reacting? This is not charisma in the conventional sense. It is not charm or good looks or status. It is something far more rare and far more powerful. It is the energy of someone who has stopped being available, and the moment you truly understand what that means, your life will never be the same. Most people spend their entire lives doing the opposite. They respond to every message the second it arrives. They explain themselves when no explanation was asked for. They say yes when every cell in their body is screaming no. They laugh at things that aren't funny, agree with things they don't believe, and shrink themselves down to fit into spaces that were never built for them. And they call this being a good person. They call it being kind. They call it love. But Carl Jung had a different name for it. He called it the persona, the mask, the performance you put on every single day so that the world will accept you, approve of you, keep you close. And the tragedy of the persona is not that it exists. We all wear masks in certain situations. The tragedy is when you forget it's a mask, when you wear it so long that you begin to believe the mask is your face. Think about the last time someone criticized you and you spent the next 3 hours defending yourself in your own head. Think about the last time a conversation ended badly and you replayed it over and over, rewriting your lines, imagining a different outcome. Think about how much of your mental and emotional energy went into that, not into building something, not into creating something, not into moving toward anything that actually matters to you, just into managing what someone else thought of you. That is what Jung meant when he talked about psychic energy being wasted. And that waste, that constant leakage of your inner resources into things that give you nothing back, is the hidden cost of being too available. Here is the uncomfortable truth that no one puts on a motivational poster. The more accessible you make yourself, the less people value you. Not because people are evil, not because the world is cruel, but because of something far more fundamental. Human psychology responds to scarcity. We are wired to want what we cannot easily have. We are wired to appreciate what requires something of us to obtain. And when you are always there, always ready, always willing, you remove the one ingredient that creates genuine appreciation: resistance. When there is no resistance, there is no tension, and without tension, there is no magnetism. You become background noise, predictable, useful, perhaps, but not deeply valued, not truly seen. And this is where the manipulation begins. Not the dramatic manipulation of movies and thrillers, not someone scheming in a dark room. The manipulation that drains most people is far more ordinary and far more insidious. It is the manipulation of expectation, of conditioning, of habit. Someone texts you and you always respond within minutes. Now when you don't, they're upset. Not because something terrible happened, simply because you broke the pattern. You disrupted their expectation. And the fact that they feel entitled to your immediate response, that they feel wronged by your delay, tells you everything you need to know about what the relationship has become. You have trained people how to treat you, and you train them by being too available. There is a concept in psychology called operant conditioning. When a behavior is consistently rewarded, it becomes expected. When it is not rewarded, the person seeking that reward becomes frustrated, then desperate, then sometimes aggressive. You have been the reward. Every immediate response, every emotional reaction, every time you dropped what you were doing to attend to someone else's needs, you were reinforcing their conditioning. You were teaching them that you are always available. And now that availability has become something they feel they own. Jung understood this dynamic deeply. He saw how people unconsciously project their own unresolved emotional needs onto others. They find someone who is open, responsive, empathetic, someone like you, and they begin to use that person as a container for everything they cannot hold within themselves: their anxiety, their loneliness, their need for validation, their fear of being alone. They pour all of it into you. And because you are a good person, because you care, because you have been conditioned to believe that being needed is the same as being loved, you hold it, you carry it, you make it your responsibility. Until one day, and this day always comes, you look around and realize you are exhausted. Genuinely, deeply exhausted. Not from work, not from circumstances, but from people. From being endlessly present for those who are never truly present for you. From pouring yourself out for relationships that never refill you. From existing as a function rather than as a person. That exhaustion is not a weakness. It is a signal. It is your psyche telling you that something has gone profoundly wrong. That the energy exchange in your life is completely out of balance. That you have been giving and giving and giving to a system that takes and takes and takes, and somewhere along the way you lost the thread back to yourself. This is what Jung called the loss of soul, not in a religious sense, in a psychological one. The gradual erosion of your own center, the slow disappearance of your authentic self beneath the weight of others' needs and your own compulsive need to meet them. And the way back, Jung argued, is not through more connection. It is not through more communication, more openness, more vulnerability in the public sense. The way back is through withdrawal. Through the radical, courageous act of pulling your energy back into yourself. Of choosing, deliberately and consciously, to become less available. Not cold, not cruel, not indifferent to the people you love, but selective, intentional, sovereign. When you stop reacting to every provocation, something shifts. When you stop explaining yourself to people who have already decided who you are, something shifts. When you stop filling silences that don't need to be filled. When you stop performing emotions you don't feel to make others comfortable. When you stop being the emergency line for people who only call when they need something, something shifts. And that shift is felt deeply by everyone around you. Because your absence speaks a language that your presence never could. It says, I am not managed by you. I am not controlled by your expectations, your moods, your need for me to perform on demand. I have an interior life that is not for public consumption. And that mystery, that sense that there is something about you that cannot be easily grasped or predicted or used, is where real power begins. Not power over others, but power over yourself. The only power that has ever truly mattered. There is a moment that changes everything. It is not a dramatic moment. There is no music, no revelation from the sky. It is quiet, almost invisible. It is the moment you decide to pause before responding. The moment you feel the pull to react and you simply do not follow it. You sit with it instead. You observe it. And in that tiny gap between stimulus and response, you begin to find yourself again. Jung spent decades studying this space. He called it the transcendent function. The ability of the psyche to hold tension between two opposites without collapsing into either one. The ability to feel the urge to react and choose not to. To feel the pressure to speak and choose silence instead. To feel the anxiety of disapproval and choose your own peace over someone else's comfort. Most people never develop this function, not because they are incapable, but because no one ever told them it was an option. No one ever told them that the automatic response, the impulse to fix, to explain, to defend, to please, is not the truth of who they are. It is a pattern, a deeply ingrained, heavily reinforced pattern, but a pattern nonetheless, and patterns can be interrupted. Think about what happens in the natural world when something becomes unpredictable, when the prey stops running in a straight line, when the river changes its course, when the season arrives late. Everything that depended on that predictability is thrown into disarray. It has to recalibrate. It has to pay attention in a new way. It has to work harder, think differently, adapt. You are not prey. But the principle is the same. When you become unpredictable in your availability, when people can no longer count on your automatic emotional response, they are forced to recalibrate. They have to work harder to understand you. They have to pay attention in a different way. And that attention, that genuine, effortful attention, is what creates real connection. Not the lazy, habitual connection that comes from you always being there, but the conscious, chosen connection that comes from someone actually seeking you out, actually wondering about you, actually valuing what they now have to earn. And here is something even more important. When you withdraw your energy from the people and situations that have been draining you, that energy does not disappear. It returns to you. And what you do with it next is everything. Jung described the process of individuation as the central task of a human life, the journey toward wholeness, the gradual integration of all the parts of yourself that have been denied, suppressed, projected outward, or simply forgotten under the weight of daily survival. And this journey cannot begin as long as all your energy is flowing outward. It cannot begin as long as you are living for the approval of others, managing their emotions, maintaining their comfort at the expense of your own depth. The moment you reclaim that energy and turn it inward, you begin to meet yourself, often for the first time. And what you find there is not always comfortable. This is the part that no one warns you about. When you stop distracting yourself with other people's dramas, when you stop pouring your attention into relationships that don't nourish you, when the noise finally quiets down, you are left alone with yourself. And there, in that silence, you meet what Jung called the shadow, the parts of you that you have never fully faced, the anger you always swallowed because anger wasn't safe, the ambition you buried because it made others uncomfortable, the grief you never processed because there was always something more urgent to attend to, the desires you dismissed because you were too busy being what everyone else needed you to be. The shadow is not your enemy. This is critical to understand. The shadow is not the dark side of you in some villainous sense. It is simply the unlived part of you. The potential that has been sitting in the dark, waiting for you to have enough stillness to finally see it. And when you do see it, when you stop running from it, when you stop projecting it outward onto the people and situations you have been using as mirrors, something extraordinary happens. You become more whole, more complete, more fully yourself. And a person who is fully themselves, who knows their own depths, who has faced their own shadow and is no longer afraid of it, is not someone who can be easily manipulated, is not someone who can be destabilized by a careless comment, a cold shoulder, a withdrawal of approval, because they are no longer dependent on external sources to tell them who they are. This is the real danger of being too available. Not just that it drains you, but that it keeps you distracted from yourself. It keeps you permanently oriented outward toward others, toward their needs, their moods, their perceptions of you, so that you never have the silence necessary to do the inner work. You become an expert in other people and a stranger to yourself. And the people who benefit most from your availability are often, consciously or not, counting on exactly that. Because a person who does not know themselves is a person who can be shaped, who can be told what they are, what they feel, what they deserve, who will accept less because they have never sat quietly enough to know their own worth. This is not cynicism. This is simply an observation about human dynamics that Jung articulated with extraordinary clarity. People who have not done their own inner work will inevitably seek that work done for them by others. They will find someone generous enough, open enough, available enough to carry what they should be carrying themselves. And they will keep returning to that person, not out of love in the truest sense, but out of need, out of dependency, out of the same mechanism that drives any addiction. And you, in your endless availability, have been enabling that dependency, not maliciously, with genuine care, but with a care that ultimately serves neither of you. Because every time you absorb someone else's emotional weight without requiring them to do their own work, you rob them of the very friction they need to grow. You make it possible for them to avoid themselves a little longer. And you make it impossible for yourself to rest. So what does it look like in practice to stop being available in this deeper sense? It does not look like silence for its own sake. It does not look like coldness or calculated absence designed to punish or provoke. Those are just different forms of reaction, still controlled by others, just in the opposite direction. What it actually looks like is the deliberate cultivation of your own interior life. It looks like spending time in your own thoughts without immediately externalizing them. It looks like sitting with an emotion instead of immediately acting on it. It looks like reading something that challenges you, creating something that matters to you, moving your body in a way that returns you to yourself. It looks like choosing, more and more often, the activity that feeds your own soul over the one that feeds someone else's ego. It looks like developing what Jung called the inner authority. The deep, quiet knowing of your own values, your own boundaries, your own direction, not the rigid rules of someone who is afraid and uses boundaries as walls, but the fluid, confident understanding of someone who knows what they are about and is therefore not confused when the world tries to tell them otherwise. When you have that inner authority, you do not need to argue. You do not need to prove yourself. You do not need to react to every challenge or justify every choice. You simply move in the direction you have chosen. Calmly, consistently, and that quality, that unshakable sense of self-direction, is magnetic in a way that no performance, no availability, no desperate attempt at connection ever could be. Because people are not actually drawn to those who need them, they are drawn to those who do not. People are not actually inspired by those who shrink to accommodate them. They are inspired by those who dare to take up space. People are not actually changed by those who absorb all their darkness without reflection. They are changed by those who refuse to hold what does not belong to them. Your withdrawal is not abandonment, it is an invitation. An invitation for people to rise to meet you rather than lean on you. An invitation for real relationship to replace the transactional dynamic that has masqueraded as one. An invitation for the people in your life to discover that they are capable of holding their own weight, if only you will stop holding it for them. And for those who cannot accept that invitation, for those who leave when you stop being endlessly available, who disappear when you stop performing, who punish you for having limits, that departure is not a loss. It is information. It is clarity. It is the universe making space for something realer to arrive. There is a kind of silence that frightens people. Not the silence of emptiness, not the silence of someone who has nothing to say, but the silence of someone who has so much inside them that they no longer feel the need to prove it. The silence of someone who has stopped auditioning for roles they never wanted to play. The silence of someone who has finally, after years of noise and performance, and endless availability, come home to themselves. That silence is what you are moving toward. And the path there is not complicated, but it is demanding. It requires something that our culture has made almost revolutionary. It requires you to choose yourself, not occasionally, not when it is convenient, or when everyone else has already been taken care of, but consistently, fundamentally, as a practice and a principle. Jung believed that the greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parent, but the principle extends far beyond parenthood. The greatest burden any relationship must bear is the unlived life of one of its members. When you are not living your own life, when you are not pursuing your own depth and direction and authentic expression, that unlived energy does not simply disappear. It becomes weight. It becomes resentment dressed as sacrifice. It becomes neediness dressed as love. It becomes control dressed as concern. And it presses down on everyone around you, whether you intend it to or not. The most generous thing you can do for the people in your life is to live your own life fully, to stop making them responsible for your fulfillment, to stop using their needs as a reason to avoid your own becoming, to stop being so available to them that you have nothing left for yourself, and then unconsciously requiring them to fill the void that your own absence from yourself has created. This is the cycle that most people never see clearly enough to break. You give and give until you are depleted. Then you feel resentful, or empty, or confused about why you feel so alone despite being surrounded by people who need you. And because you have been taught that the answer to emptiness is more connection, more giving, more availability, you give more. And the cycle tightens. Breaking it requires a kind of courage that is rarely celebrated. Not the courage of grand gestures, not the courage of confrontation or dramatic declarations. The quiet courage of saying, not today. The quiet courage of not responding, of not explaining, of not shrinking, of not performing an emotion you do not feel just because someone in front of you seems to require it. The quiet courage of sitting with the discomfort of someone else's disappointment without immediately moving to fix it. Because here is what happens in that discomfort, in that pause, in that space you create by not rushing to fill it. People are forced to feel something. And feeling something, genuinely feeling it rather than having it immediately soothed away, is where real change begins. For them and for you. You stop being a comfort mechanism and start being a presence, a real one. Complex, dimensional, sometimes unavailable, sometimes surprising. A person rather than a function. And that transformation in how you show up changes everything about what comes to you. Jung spoke often about the principle of enantiodromia, the idea that everything, when pushed to its extreme, eventually turns into its opposite. The person who is always agreeable eventually explodes. The person who is always giving eventually shuts down completely. The person who is always available eventually disappears, not because they chose to in a conscious and sovereign way, but because the psyche, in its deep wisdom, forced the correction. What you are doing when you consciously choose to withdraw, to protect your energy, to become more selective and more interior, is preempting that forced correction. You are choosing the transformation before the breakdown demands it. You are doing what Jung called the conscious work of individuation, rather than waiting for life to do it for you through crisis. And make no mistake, if you do not do this work voluntarily, life will eventually create the conditions that force you to do it anyway. The illness that requires you to slow down. The relationship that ends and strips away the role you had been playing within it. The loss that removes the structure you had been hiding inside. Life has a way of burning down what is not real, what is not sustainable, what is not truly you. The only question is whether you participate consciously in that burning, or whether you wait for it to consume you. Choose the fire you can control over the one you cannot. Now, a word about the people who will resist your transformation, and there will be people who resist it. Some of them loudly, some of them with guilt and accusation and a sudden deep concern for who you are becoming. They will say you have changed, and they will not mean it as a compliment. They will say you are cold, selfish, distant, that the old you was better, that they preferred you before. What they mean, though they will rarely say it this clearly, is that they preferred the version of you that was easier to manage, the version that responded immediately, that never said no, that could be counted on, to absorb their projections and return warmth regardless of what they brought. They preferred the function. And the emergence of a full person in its place is genuinely disorienting for someone who has been using you as a tool without realizing it. Do not take their discomfort as evidence that you are wrong. Take it as evidence that you are changing. Real change always creates friction. Always. If everyone in your life is perfectly comfortable with your transformation, you are probably not transforming deeply enough. The people who truly love you, who are capable of genuine relationship rather than functional transaction, will adjust. They will be curious about who you are becoming. They may be briefly unsettled, but they will ultimately lean in rather than pull away. The ones who only stay when you are serving them will leave. And as painful as that can feel in the moment, it is one of the clearest gifts the process of individuation offers you. Clarity about who is really there. This is the other side of unavailability that no one talks about. Yes, it protects your energy. Yes, it creates a kind of magnetism. Yes, it disrupts manipulation and forces recalibration in your relationships. But more than any of that, it reveals the truth about the people around you and about yourself. Because when you stop performing, when you stop managing impressions, when you stop being endlessly available as a way of ensuring that people will stay, you find out who stays anyway. You find out who you are when you are not defined by your usefulness to others. You find out what you actually want, what you actually feel, what you actually believe, separate from the noise of everyone else's needs and expectations and projections. And that self-knowledge, that deep, hard-won, quiet knowing of who you actually are, is the foundation of everything, of genuine confidence, which is not the same as performance, of genuine connection, which is not the same as dependency, of genuine peace, which is not the same as the temporary relief of having pleased someone. Jung said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, not who your parents needed you to be, not who your culture rewards, not who your fears have shaped through years of avoidance and accommodation, but who you actually are, in your depths, when the noise is gone and the performance is stopped and there is nothing left but the quiet, irreducible truth of your own nature. That becoming does not happen in the presence of everyone. It does not happen when you are always on, always available, always performing the self that others have come to expect. It happens in the withdrawal, in the silence, in the moments you choose yourself over the approval of others and sit with the discomfort of that choice long enough to discover that you can survive it. More than survive it, that you can be nourished by it. Start small if you have to. The next time you feel the impulse to respond immediately, wait, not forever, just long enough to ask yourself whether you actually want to respond, or whether you are simply following the conditioned pattern